everyone. Welcome to the This Week in Science Special Friday podcast broadcast. I am doing this little intro before the intro to let everyone know, as usual, that if there are technical difficulties or problems during this live stream, they will be edited out for the final podcast version. So if you enjoy nicely edited audio, make sure you subscribe to our podcasts wherever you find podcasts. Hello, everyone. I hope you're ready for a show. Woo-woo! Special Friday podcast broadcast. Let's get started. In 3, 2, this is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number. It's a This Week in Science interview episode recorded on Friday, February 13th, 2026. Why do you matter? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and in this special interview episode, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Rebecca Goldstein. There is no disclaimer, so we will get on with the music. Everybody dance.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good afternoon, TWIS minions. This is a special episode where I'm interviewing Dr. Rebecca Goldstein about the topic of mattering. Thank you for joining us. I hope we have all of the science and conversation for you on today's show. And without any further ado, I want to introduce our guest and the topic. Rebecca Goldstein is an award-winning philosopher, writer, public intellectual, the author of 10 books, 36 Arguments for the Existence of God, a work of fiction, Betraying Spinoza, the renegade Jew who gave us modernity, and most recently, The Mattering Instinct, how our deepest longing drives us and divides us. With a PhD in philosophy of science from Princeton University, Rebecca has taught at Yale, Columbia, NYU, Dartmouth, and Harvard. A fellow of the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences, she's been supported by the MacArthur Genius Grant and fellowships from the Guggenheim, Whiting Institute, Radcliffe Institute, and the National Science Foundation. She was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Obama in 2015 and is in an amazing freight elevator in her home in Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to the show, Dr. Goldstein.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So, getting into your book and being invited to speak with you about this, I was really struck by the idea that you bring up, this instinct of mattering. How did you go from early in your graduate career as a physicist to wind up really thinking about this concept of mattering?
Yeah, I love the word mattering. And my shorthand for what we are, our species, we are creatures of matter who long to matter. You can only say it in English, but it's so very nice to say. It actually makes the translation.
I'd love to hear it in other languages and see how it comes out.
This verb to matter,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting, the whole story. I don't want to get into it, but the whole linguistic history of how the noun that we use to mean the stuff of of reality, the stuff of the universe, turned into this verb which means that which is deserving of attention, which is what mattering means. So how did I start thinking about this? I actually did not go to graduate school in physics. I was an undergraduate, and then and fully intending to go on in physics. Already had applied and gotten into the graduate programs I wanted in physics, and I was taking a graduate course at Columbia on quantum mechanics, and I wasn't the first person in the world. I was having a lot of trouble with trying to attach this theory to anything that looked at all remotely like the world that we inhabit. Just how do you get from this theory to, observable reality? And I kept asking my physics professor that, and he was of that school which said, shut up and calculate. Don't even use the word reality. It's and that's not why I had gone into physics. I really did want to know the nature of reality. He finally told me, why don't you go talk to the philosophers? They ask these kind of meaningless questions about reality that you seem intent on asking. And so I found my way to a philosopher at Columbia named Sidney Morgenbesser. And yes, it was amazing. And he was the one who said, you're really interested in philosophy of science. That's what you're really interested in. And so that's what I ended up going into. And so that's how I ended up in philosophy. And my career since then has taken all sorts of twists and turns and finally got me to writing this book about what it is to be matter that longs to matter.
And in the introduction or the preface for the book, you do say that the first book you wrote was a work of fiction, and that led to this ultimate book on mattering.
Yeah.
So what question was it that
so that was
that transition?
That was the second way I went off the tracks. First on the track, be a scientist, then become a philosopher, and then I had never intended to write a novel. It was not one of my goals in life, but I love novels. And the first line of a novel came to me. I heard a first line. I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. That was not my voice. I was married at the time to a very smart physicist, Sheldon Goldstein, but we were both very young in the beginning of our careers. I had never been asked what it was like to be married to a genius. I heard it, and I knew it was a novel, and I wrote it.
Amazing.
And it actually became a bestseller, which was actually my colleagues didn't like that at all.
No, because you're in academia, and academics are supposed to do academics.
Exactly. And I was a woman
do.
doing technical philosophy of science, right?
Yeah.
Foundations of quantum mechanics, that kind of thing. And to write a novel, and it was a sexy novel. She had a certain interpretation of the mind-body problem. Did you want to be a mind or a body? And so I had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of fun. She was a lot more fun than I am. And, but, it was like, to be a young woman trying to make her way in that male-dominated field and then to write a novel, it's like I might as well have the word frivolous tattooed on my forehead, really. But I just can't, when things come to me and they excite me, when they light me up, I have to go that way. So here's how I ended up, and this is actually my 11th book, and the Mattering Instinct.
Okay.
The editor who acquired it, and he bought the book, but at our first meeting, he said, I still don't understand your protagonist. She's very bright, she's very smart, she's very sexually desirable, funny, and she's always teetering on the cusp of despair. She's so unhappy. And I could hear that in the first line. I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. I could hear discontent there. And that's the way it went. And I thought about it. And after about 3 weeks, I kind of heard her, and that's one of the cool things when you're writing novels, you hear your characters talking to you.
Yeah.
I heard her say, because I don't feel like I matter in the way that most matters to me. And between us, it was kind of a collaboration between her and me. We came up with this whole idea of this mattering map, different regions predicate a life that matters on different things. It can be things as seemingly trivial as how well you dress, that you talk, or the depth of the mathematical theorems that you produce. All different ways of going about this thing. But that what I came to see in understanding her and in understanding other characters about whom I've written, including Kurt Gödel for Incompleteness and Spinoza in that book, and Plato even, is this longing to somehow or other matter, which is to prove ourselves deserving of our own incessant, inordinate attention to ourselves, which we are wired to do. We are wired to pay all of this attention to ourselves. All creatures that have attention, it's an adaptation to help them survive and to thrive. Clearly.
Yeah, but so then we get into questions of sociality of species, the awareness or consciousness question, these the hard question of consciousness.
A hard problem of consciousness. And that's what my dissertation problem was on, the hard problem of consciousness. My dissertation advisor was Thomas Nagel. He of what is it like to be a bat fame.
Right.
Yes.
How can we ever know what it is to be another organism? How can you ever put yourself in that place? And yet we have a theory of mind as humans where we are aware that others are aware of themselves as we are aware of ourselves.
Exactly. And we have a theory of mind that recognizes the difference in the subjectivities of these other creatures of our own species, let alone bats and all that. But it's hard enough to know, it's hard enough to know those closest to us. There's a kind of opacity, but we at a very early age, even maybe as young as 3 or 4, the toddler age, can recognize that others have beliefs and desires that are different from our own. And this is, of course, a very useful adaptation for a gregarious species like us to develop. Not only are we gregarious, but we're also what's called altricial. We are,
as opposed to precocious, right?
It takes a very long time for these really complicated brains to come fully into place. Those prefrontal lobes, by the time they're in, we're getting our first wrinkle. I mean, this is really.
And so, in a sense, we are dependent upon the attention of others for our survival.
And we have to be able to read them to some extent. That's a theory of mind. It's a theory of other minds, and to understand, basically whom we can trust, and because we are so dependent, and all through our lives, but particularly in our protracted immaturity. It takes us into our 3rd decade to be fully prepared to lead a responsible, accountable adult life.
And for some people, that not even their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th decade, it never happens. But
yes,
for some,
so true. But even among the best of us, and so we really have a very well-developed theory of mind. And here's the thing: so there is, our dependence on others and mattering to others, having others finding us deserving of their attention, which is our sociality, our gregariousness. And it's kind of easy to understand how we evolved this. I mean, it's, we altricial, gregarious creatures. The thing that I'm most interested in is, and that has to do this sociability with our relationship with others. The thing that I'm most interested in and talk about as the mattering instinct is our relationship with ourselves. That we, alone, I think, of all the species, have, because of our capacity for self-reflection, that we can turn our theory of mind onto ourselves and interrogate ourselves about all sorts of features of us, discover things about ourselves. That's what therapy is all about. Right? Oh, no wonder I keep getting into these kinds of relationships. It's because I don't think I'm deserving of anything better or something. We can really discover we are not fully accessible even to ourselves. So and one of the things that we can see about ourselves is how much we matter to ourselves. Of course we do. We're wired to. But I think, and this is the trickiest part and the most philosophical part of my argument, is that we feel, when we see how much we matter to ourselves, we feel some kind of unease that we pay such an excessive amount of attention to ourselves. And the thought
Mhm.
arises, do I really deserve this? If the way I measure how much something matters is how much attention I give to it, it would seem to be that I judge myself to be the thing that most matters in all the universe, because I certainly pay myself the most attention. I have to.
Mhm.
In
Is
order,
there
yeah.
yeah, is there a difference between, cultures? So, from what we're talking about, there is a mattering instinct. When you are born, you're not aware of it, but you matter to yourself, and
Yes,
you learn to pay attention to others for your survival during development, and so there's a learned mattering that's externally focused.
exactly.
And then in Western culture, it seems as though we have learned to prioritize the external focus over the internal, so that goal-oriented behaviors, externally focused behaviors, matter more than we do. And you can be selfish, you can have high self-esteem, but you could, as a female, be, called names, or if you
Mhm.
are powerful and you take care of yourself first, right? It's a
Yes.
negative connotation in our society. Is that different between different cultures?
I actually think, again, shaky grounds here, but I have tried to do as much deep research into other cultures as I can. And that as long as life is secure enough, so that the
Mm,
basic things, are taken care of, safety, food,
yeah.
roof over your head, bodily uh,
Autonomy,
integrity,
agency.
agency,
Mhm.
playfulness, all of these things, that this question emerges, and it emerged at a particular time in the course of human history. We call it the axial age.
Hmm.
It is the period of history when all of the religions currently extant that are still practiced, as well as Western philosophy, emerged.
Mm.
And so this is in India, in China, in Europe, in Asia. I mean, yeah, in the Greek world, in Europe, that in all of the places in which life had reached, at least for certain classes, enough safety and enough leisure for the question of, what am I pursuing this for? What is
Why?
it all about?
Yeah.
The question which makes us, which brings the question of justification into our lives, and also brings values into our life, that there was a kind of change in consciousness. And the reason it's called the
Mhm.
axial age is as if human consciousness had shifted on its axis, so that suddenly it was thinking not just about basic survival, but about, what is this survival for?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? Which makes us brings values in, and brought many parts of the world,
Yeah.
Confucianism, Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, brought a religious answer to it, and in the ancient Greek world, brought a secular philosophy answer. It's through reason that we are going to justify. Oh, yes.
And so
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes.
on screen, I am showing an image of the maps of mattering, the mattering maps. And so if you could explain these maps and how the religions map onto the
Yeah.
concept.
Thank you. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, but just to sort of finish the
Yeah.
addressing your question, which is so, so very important. I would hate to think that I was being, you know, um, uh, Western in my thinking.
Yeah.
No, the axial age is some evidence for the fact that when life is stable enough, then this sort of search for what is it all about
Becomes
emerges, and
yeah.
that there and yeah, so that there are basically, I would say, and still to our day, 4 basic strategies that have been employed. And there is the religious, spiritual strategy, and that's what I call the transcenders. And by the way, I actually got AI to help me with percentages, the size of these maps. It was really quite amazing how helpful AI was with this. But the transcenders have a kind of sense like we matter to the universe, that there is a transcendent something or other, a transcendent presence, whether you call it God or something else, that created heaven and earth and the laws of nature, and the moral order within, and created us with a purpose. We are intentionally created, which provides a tremendous sense of mattering. It's cosmic mattering. It's that you have a role to play in the narrative of eternity. It doesn't get much bigger than that. And I think that's the great power of, the religious spiritual answer. And so, most of my friends, as well as I am not a believer. I was born very much into a believing family, but I read Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian. And even though I was not a Christian, I was Jewish. It completely got me
changed the way you were thinking. Yeah.
So because he goes through all the arguments for God's existence and shows the flaws in them, and I was having a lot of trouble believing in God anyway, that because of the problem of suffering. So yes, I am not a transcender, but I really, looking at it through the lens of our longing to matter, the mattering instinct, I see its power. And I know what it's like to go from being being a transcender to a non-transcender. And it is a loss of mattering in the universe. You have to do it for yourself somehow. So what's the next one? Socializers. I have found in talking to people endlessly over the last 40 years that this topic seemed to me interesting, about how they go about feeling some purpose in their lives, some sense of coherence, of meaningfulness. And I find that most people, when I talk about mattering, they immediately interpret it, they translate it into mattering to others.
That external focus.
That external focus. And sometimes the others are people who are already in their lives as gregarious creatures. We need people in our lives, all of us, whether they're family, friends, lovers, colleagues, community members, whoever, but people who are going to notice if we disappear from the face of the earth. They're in our lives. We don't necessarily love them, but we matter to them. And so whether we deserve it or not, and we need that. So it could be that, or it could be even strangers. And that's what trying to answer the longing to matter through fame is all about. You matter to a bunch of strangers. Somebody I read had said that, had cynically defined being famous as having a lot of people caring about you who you are happy do not have to care about in return. Right? Very cynical.
That is very cynical, but the parasocial relations,
But in fact, if we're trying to convince ourselves we're deserving of our own attention, to have lots of people paying attention to us seems like good evidence.
It's evidence that you should matter.
That you ought to matter, at least to yourself, that they're paying you. But and research shows that it can be quite hollow.
Is that any different though than ego versus id?
See, I think so. I feel that there's something endearing and somewhat even laudable about our attempt to convince ourselves that we are deserving of our attention. We are wired to feel that way, and yet we're asking for some sort of justification. And whenever I would hear the phrase, the intrinsic dignity of being human or something, it just seems like bullshit to me. What does this mean? But now I understand it in this way. There's something dignified or something estimable about trying to justify yourself in your own eyes, not just working according to the laws of nature that have shaped us, but trying to convince ourselves that we're deserving of working that way. There's an extra burden. we take on in being human. And it's different from egoism. You might be, and I should get to the heroic strivers next. You might do it, by being a saint. That's how you try to convince yourself that you're deserving of all the attention that you must, according to the biological laws, give yourself. So
as the Olympics are going on, this is also very an interesting.
Exactly.
Why achieve? Why go to the Olympics? Why do
go
this?
through all this pain? Oh my God, the pain that these people go through. And that there are all different ways. I count myself as a heroic striver. And you don't have to do something very grand to be a heroic striver. What a heroic striver is somebody who has certain standards of excellence in their mind that they want to approach, even if it's asymptotically getting closer and closer, but never reaching there. That in order to reconcile themselves with themselves, and it could be intellectual, it could be artistic, it could be athletic, it could be ethical, it could be entrepreneurial, it could be military. There are all different ways, but that it's not to impress others. It's to feel like you're doing something meaningful with your life. And it could be raising a beautiful garden, adding beauty to the world in some way. It doesn't have to be winning the Olympics or any of these things. And I tell stories about people who actually make it very, very clear that they are not doing this for the approval of others. I'm very interested in those kinds of stories to sort of pull apart, doing it for the adulation, the fame, or doing it because this is the thing that you feel is going to give you the impetus to get out of bed in the morning and push on into your future.
At one point in time, I was I was overloaded with people and relationships, and I went to a party one night, and somebody introduced me to another person, and I just was in the back of my head like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can make another friend. I don't know if I have the energy to build a new friendship. And the first words that came out of my mouth after saying hello and hearing their name were, "Why do you matter?" And my friend just looked at me, and the person looked at me, and everybody later was like, "Oh my gosh, Kiki, you're so spiky. How could you ask that of somebody?" And but it just came out, and I've actually held on to it a bit.
Yes, it's
and the way that people can answer that question is very telling.
It's so telling. I can almost tell which of those continents a person is on by how they hear it. When I say to a transgender, "Do you matter?" They hear it as a spiritual question that I'm asking. The socializers hear it about mattering to others, and the heroic strivers hear about it as, have you accomplished some standard? I mean, what is your standard of excellence that you are going for? So it's interesting. I have found ways a little less blunt.
Right. You don't have to be that blunt.
But I have yet to meet a person, and I can tell, my theory of mind has been cultivated by this question, how to feel people out and to get to the really meaningful questions. And one of the most amazing questions I've had, and it's somebody I profile in my book. I wanted to speak. Oh, maybe I should get to the last one because he comes up in the context of my last continent, and that's the competitors. And some people hear the question as, do you matter more than others? And they're the ones who become very discomfited when I talk to them about their mattering, because it is a competitive thing for them. It's a zero-sum game. To the extent that they matter, others have to matter less. It could be maybe just in their field. And my favorite story about this is a Nobel laureate whom I know, and another friend who also knows him had said to me that he was happy for all of 15 minutes in his entire life. And that's when he got the call from Stockholm
for the Nobel.
And then he remembered that other people had also gotten the Nobel Prize, and there went his happiness. So that is a
Oh,
competitor. That's a competitor. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
That one,
I just got so sad for that person.
that is exactly the right. It is so hard to be a competitor. You're always in an adversarial position. Somebody can steal your mattering from you. Instead of rejoicing in one another's accomplishments, something's taken away from you. And I really do know quite a few. That was the starkest thing I ever heard. But I do know quite a few people like that.
Yeah, but on the maps that are represented here, and as you
Yeah.
said, they have to do with the percentages of individuals in the population who
Yeah.
represent these different groupings, and the
Yeah.
competitors are the smallest
Yes.
general grouping that we have. So
Yeah.
we
Yes.
may see the impacts of competitors perhaps more than we do heroic strivers who are not telling people about the work that they're doing in in a, boastful way. And so maybe they
Exactly.
have an over, and they have a larger impact on our society, even though they're the smaller grouping.
I love that. You know, I really I that never occurred to me. I love you're right. When in fact, given that we're living in a secular age and what has taken, the place of this sort of cosmic mattering are things like um, being rich, being famous, being powerful. Sadly, that has sort of filled the vacuum that these are the people who most matter. I saw this Newsweek headline, and it was a cover story. It said the 50 people who most matter, and they were all, as if, that's a competitive notion, that they're. But of course, you're right. That the role that the competitors play in our day-to-day life, which, I don't want to get into politics or society or anything, but it's kind of bad when, first of all, there's this notion of inequitable mattering. Some matter more than others.
Right.
And the ones that matter are doing something that most people can't. Most people cannot be billionaires, soon to be trillionaires. It keeps going up, right?
Mhm.
Most people can't be famous. Most people can't be powerful, and maybe we don't want to be. Maybe we really are done. That's not what lights us up.
Yeah.
Because it is a kind of temperamental thing, and that's really interesting. There's a whole there's a theory of personality psychology that kind of gets to why some of us temperamentally go, where we end up on the mattering map, which continent we end up on is there's something temperamental about that. But that's such a brilliant point you just made. Thank you.
Thank you. But so seeing this, as we look to the future and artificial intelligence, quote unquote, that large catch-all term,
Yeah.
that is the idea of a general intelligence, right? Artificial
Yes.
intelligence that
Yes.
will be, we are begetting our the image in our own likeness in technology, and is there a way to include your philosophy of mattering in the programming of these algorithms, of these models? And could it be that the competitors are left out? Or that or an awareness of the impact of, that I'm just wondering how.
AI and mattering is a really important thing to think about. Because
Yeah.
if, in fact, and this is what I would want to argue, our life satisfaction, not our moment-to-moment happiness, but something much more important, our overall life satisfaction, is this life that each of us is living worth living? If it is very much dependent on, these two aspects, having people in our life, to whom we matter. If we're lacking that, we suffer the pain of loneliness. That's not a good life. That's not a life of satisfaction. But also this other aspect, the feeling, that you can justify your own existence to yourself, some sense of meaningfulness, purpose, coherence, this sort of thing, mattering, that you matter, that your life is not a waste, is basically it. If that too is necessary for life satisfaction, then AI may pose a real challenge to this. It may be able to think better than we, and heroic strivers, what makes it really worthwhile. I know a lot of mathematicians, I don't need adulation. There's, Gregor Perelman, who, he solved, a very important mathematical problem. They wanted to celebrate him, and he went off and disappeared into the world. He
I
did.
think that is so lovely.
Yes, that had nothing to do with it. He wants to be alone with his math. But if some of the best things that we've produced are going to be done better by AI, it's going to really close the door for many of the best ways that we can go about trying to justify ourselves to ourselves. And I'm worried about that. And also in terms of our social relationships, it's already happening that a lot of young people are saying that they have better relationships with AI, with the chat box. Yeah. It's a better, it's just pouring, trained to give them all the empathy and flattery and everything that they desire, better than dealing with real humans. And I think both of these things can sort of close off our humanness or narrow it. And so it's something to think about. And I am flooded with invitations to think about this. So that's my next project. That is all I'm going to do, is think about AI and our humanness, what makes, our need to feel that we matter, that our lives are not a waste.
And as we come up to the potential, event horizon of artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence, super intelligence, et cetera, what kind of existential crises is it going to bring to individuals, to humanity? How will it lead to changes in our culture and society? I think, please think about these things.
I will think as hard as I possibly can with others. I'm just so happy that there are so many conferences being organized. Suddenly, my schedule is flooded with these invitations, and I'm really happy about it. I have so much to learn about this and to think through about this. But I've got myself a real good, what I call mattering project. It's a project that's just so interesting to me. It's had all these twists and turns: physics, novels, philosophy, ethics now, AI. But there's always a common thread here. And it just, I just wish this for everybody, a good mattering project that can see them through for many, many decades.
Yeah, that's, for me, it is this podcast and talking about science and sharing science. Why do I matter? It's because I am curious about the world and passionate about sharing it with others.
Yeah.
And so I hope that we ask ourselves, not in a blaming way or a harsh way, but in a way to get at our inner core.
Yes.
Why do we matter?
Right.
And I hope you continue on this mattering project. And thank you so much for bringing your book to the world, for writing it out as a book that we can all read and think about, and maybe bring us to our own realizations and thoughts as we move through the world. I have so many more questions, but it's a wonderful book. And thank you for speaking with me today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It really has been a sincere pleasure. And my highest praise to people is you are living a counter-entropic life. You are in favor of life and against disorder and destruction and death and all the things that entropy means. And I think you truly are.
Thank you. May we all, right?
May we all.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Counter-entropic. Yes, that is what I do. Putting words to the page. It's ordering the thoughts and ordering the ideas and bringing the words to others.
That's right. Bringing it out there into other minds, adding more clarity, less confusion.
Yes. Thank you for what you do with that. Everybody, the book is The Mattering Instinct, How Our Deepest Longing Drives and Divides Us. Rebecca Newberger Goldstein, once again, thank you so much
Well,
for
thank
joining
you.
me today.
Thank
And
you.
everyone out there, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Shout outs to all the people who help with the show, Fada for helping with show notes and social media, Identity 4 for recording the show, Gord and others in the chat room, all of you in the chat room for making sure the chat room is a wonderful, compassionate, respectful place. Rachel, thank you for editing the show, and thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and on all podcast platforms that are out there. And we're looking forward to talking with you again next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time, on live streaming on those platforms. And if you've learned anything from the show, please remember, it's all in your head. Bye, everybody.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science.
And I'm going out. Oh, wait. Ending stream.